Well, I think energy practitioners are a great source of innovation, knowledge, particularly knowledge gained at a local level, and often are ones that are developing very innovative business models and technologies, and in many cases those are clean, renewable energy technologies and businesses. So I think there's a great opportunity to learn from them and bring that knowledge and experience up into some of the higher level political agenda and discourse.
And I think there's two mechanisms at play here. One is non-state actors can make real contributions to, for instance, the implementation of NDCs. But I think what is more important than that is non-state actors can demonstrate that governments are not doing enough and that they can do more and that ambition levels can be higher.
I believe that these people, these communities that our network represents, they've been working towards, the climate without even knowing they were working for the climate. It was just something that it was the nature of it. They live in these conditions without electricity or in places where they see the impact of climate change happening, and so I think they react towards it.
I really view these networks as one of their key roles is to accelerate learning and adoption of innovations and best practices, and to avoid the duplication of failures, because we're seeing a lot of experimentation in this space, and that's necessary, but we don't all need to be making the same mistakes.
We are also trying to communicate and to highlight what we are doing in different regions in the country. And so it has been greatest place to know, to meet people, to learn from each other, to learn from the good, the bad experiences.
We have developed this approach that involves first harnessing what's been done and documented, and then ground truthing what's missing in that collection of knowledge, and then bringing together the identified stakeholders to advance a certain issue that links directly to the longevity of projects, whether it's how projects are used or how they're built or what is the policy that made it happen.
What we're trying to use our networks for is to inform the likes of some of these larger political donor-driven initiatives to ensure that their strategies and programs are informed by the reality of what's happening on the ground. That really, I think, is one of the powers of these networks.
One fundamental issue which is inhibiting making these connections is that the hardcore negotiation process is very narrowly focused historically on counting GHG emissions.
Right.
There hasn't really been much discussion about the actual solutions, how to actually reduce emissions.
What non-state actors need to, what hinders them in keeping their commitments. And one is like access to finance, of course. It's a lack of capacity. It's a lack of recognition. It's a lack of specialized knowledge. How do you facilitate that? At the moment, I think that is not really done.
I think the challenge is it's less about the economics between traditional fossil fuel and renewables as it is about the structural and political frameworks that inherently create a bias towards centralized grid versus distributed. And I think that's really one of the biggest challenges in the access agenda.
So we have a number of member organizations who are actually local associations. And these groups are basically all volunteer run. And if they even had a little bit of funding to make sure they could travel and meet every 3 months, or to publish something that's in English or has sort of the mainstream messaging, or to have a mentor from the higher level world to coach them on, well, this is the data we would really like to see. And
it will be necessary to provide platforms for those practitioners, support them in actually being able to showcase what they're doing. promoting platforms at the international level, which is being done to some extent now, but that could also be extended, but more importantly also at regional and national levels, to give them a space to actually talk about what they're doing and showing what they're doing and what's possible.
In this ecosystem of non-state climate action, you need intermediaries to kind of inform and tell the many actors that are willing, like what climate change and climate governance is about, what are the goals and how can you contribute. I think it's also stimulating for non-state actors to feel, especially the smaller ones, feel like they are part of a bigger solution, right?
The same technologies that the climate community are talking about and trying to advance for the purposes of mitigation are actually some of the most cost-effective and promising technologies to address energy access. But I think it's really important not to conflate the two. I mean, even if you do achieve universal energy access, it's a very small contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. I think it's a really good point for all of us to kind of remind ourselves that these are two related but separate agendas for which there are common solutions. But the drivers are different, and we should always keep that in mind.
I think to have national networks, it could be of very good help in one hand, so that we could have more active work locally and context-oriented, because the countries within Latin America are different. They have different idiosyncrasies and weather and resources and conditions and so on, or at least to have sub-regional more like presence and activities and so on. It would be very good.
We think with going through networks to bringing people together and making them understand that that they have a clear role also and for achieving SDGs, and on the other hand, understanding by the people that are supporting programs or bringing forward technologies that it's important to have these people on the ground.